Okay, folks, we have five big stories, two little stories, and a meme. We'll get right into it. So I saw this and I thought, wow, the IMF, that's the International Monetary Fund, gets back to business with Russia, appointing a sanctioned Putin crony that even Russia's own anti-corruption organizations refer to as, quote, one of the top bribe takers and warmongers, unquote. Okay, so here it is in the Kyiv Post, the same article. Kenza Yudeva, an advisor to Bank of Russia governor, one of the governors, will become Russia's new executive director from the Russian Federation at the International Monetary Fund. This is unbelievable that they're okay with doing that. The International Anti-Corruption Foundation, founded by Alexei Navalny, puts Yudeva in a category of, quote, top bribe takers and warmongers on their sanctions database. Her activities play an important role in Russia's resistance to international sanctions pressure from the international community. And yet the IMF is okay with doing this. The West just seems to want to cripple itself at every turn. She remains one of the de facto leaders of the Central Bank of Russia. The news came on the same day when Reuters reports about the IMF sending its first mission to Russia since the full-scale invasion began. I don't even have the words for this. This is just utter foolishness. Okay, here's big story number two. Iran denies providing ballistic missiles to Russia. They say that they're not supporting any side in the Russian-Ukrainian war, but we know that they have sent this. We know that they have supported them with Shaheeds before, and they've sent 200 ballistic missiles. And even this guy, a member of Iran's parliament, admitted that Russia has received Iranian ballistic missiles to use in attacks on Ukraine. When asked about potential sanctions for sending missiles to Russia, he responded, "It can get worse. We provide missiles to Hezbollah, Hamas, and why not Russia?" Like, okay, well, you can see who's on which side of the equation pretty clearly here. This morning I talked about this briefly, but I want to get into it a little bit more. CIA chief says the risk of Russian nuclear use in Ukraine was real. Quote, there was a point in the fall of 2022 when I thought that there was a real risk of potential use of tactical nuclear weapons, unquote, said CIA Director William Burns. He added that the U.S. president sent him to speak with his Russian counterpart. And so here's a little bit about it. We're going to see this little clip of him talking. But the president sent me to talk to one of our Russian counterparts at the end of 22 to make very clear what the consequences of that kind of escalation would be.
Going to continue to saber rattle from time to time. The president sent me to talk to one of our Russian counterparts, Sergei Narishkin, at the end of 2022 to make very clear what the consequences of that kind of escalation would be. And we've continued to be very direct about that. So I don't think we can afford to be intimidated by that saber rattling or bullying. We got to be mindful of it, but
yeah, so, and that's the reality of it. They will bully to the degree that they can, and a bully backs down when a bully doesn't feel like he can pick on his target any longer. Okay, The Blaze et al. May be sheepishly canceling Lauren Chen, but RT still proudly displays this magnificent piece of analysis published on February 16th, 2022. That's before the war broke, and I'm going to show you the article in just a moment. Thank you for preserving it for posterity, Russian government-run media. Now, already before the war started, there was already this divide between conservatives who were conservative, like Reagan conservatives like myself, and conservatives who were in this odd isolationist peacenik kind of lane. It's very unusual for conservatives. We were usually the more hawkish of the two parties. Okay, here's RT. Just type in Lauren Chen, rt.com. You can see this for yourself. Type in Lauren Chen, 47 results. That doesn't mean that she wrote 47 articles, but a tweet of hers or something that she said, or she was part of an interview or on Crosstalk or something along those lines. Okay, and then here's how Russia carried this conversation about the sanctions that just happened here recently. YouTube bans all alleged Russia-linked right-wing channels. In a statement cited by Washington Post on Thursday, the Google-owned video hosting service said it had terminated audited the accounts of the tenant media company and 4 other entities linked to conservative commentator Chen in a bid to, quote, combat coordinated influence operations, unquote. The move comes after the Department of Justice on Wednesday charged 2 Russians identified as RT employees with violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act, money laundering, and illegally funneling millions of dollars to U.S.-based entities to promote a so-called Russian narrative. A so-called Russian narrative? Really, RT? It was clearly a Russian narrative on various politically charged issues. Following the indictment, conservative outlet Blaze Media said, as quoted by Semaphore, that it had terminated a contract with Chen, whom it described, and I saw that article with Semaphore, but they terminated and didn't say much more than that. They described her as an independent contractor without providing an explanation for the move. In a separate development, the U.S. Treasury Department on Wednesday sanctioned several Russian nationals, including RT editor-in-chief Margarita Simonyan and 3 other senior RT employees over alleged efforts to influence the election. Okay, so that's how RT carried it. Now let's go to her article. Now remember, this is before the war actually started. The war starts like a week later. 16 February 2022. If you're American and oppose war with Russia, expect to be smeared as unpatriotic. I don't see a lot of people smearing them as unpatriotic. I mean, two and a half years in, like wrong-headed, not getting it, like this is boneheaded, don't do that, you should be supporting this so we don't have World War III, but not unpatriotic. Pro-war hawks in the West have resorted to the overt hostility toward those who argue against the conflict in Ukraine. On Tuesday, after weeks of international uncertainty and fears of conflict, Russia announced it would be pulling its troops back from the border with Ukraine. This was a week before they invaded. This news came after repeated assurances from President Vladimir Putin and officials that Moscow had no desire for war and that troop movements and positioning were merely training exercises. This was a week before they invaded. Markets immediately responded to this development with renewed optimism as the Dow jumped 400 points, a week before they invaded. One group, curiously silent in light of the seemingly positive turn of events, was the war hawks, goaded by Western media, who in preceding hours had all but assured the public that an invasion and armed conflict were inevitable, a week before they invaded. And in fact, they weren't really that big of a voice. They were saying, hey, this could happen. You got to be careful. Watch this. They weren't saying, yay, we want a war. That's a big difference. And while the establishment neocons, that's people like me, by the way, if you hear somebody talking about establishment Republicans, that means they are MAGA, because MAGA talks about the establishment. The rest of us are just talking about Republicans, Democrats, government officials, that sort of thing. So it's like, it's code word. The establishment neocons and neolibs may say that their hawkish warnings and preparations were simply the logical conclusion given the information available at the time, a week before they invaded. There have been voices who have attempted to pull back the mounting calls for war. The pro-war camp instead resorted to smears in order to justify their particular need to stoke tensions with another global superpower. No, they're not stoking tensions. They're trying to prevent it. And it's a week before they invaded. At the very end, it's had some interesting things down here as well. One of the most prominent anti-war voices that has emerged is Fox News' Tucker Carlson, who has likewise been attacked for his views. Because that was new. Before that, he wasn't a dove before this. Carlson frequently devoted his time on his program to questioning whether, regardless of Russia's intentions, involving the U.S. in Ukrainian affairs is in America's best interest. So now he's starting already before the war to talk about Russian talking points, especially at a time when domestic problems abound. Another Russian talking point. Additionally, Carlson has been skeptical of political attempts to paint Ukraine as a Western-style democracy, another Russian talking point, in order to garner public support for any potential alliances or intervention. So he was full of Russian talking points even before the war began. For his efforts, Carlson has received especially vicious condemnation from the likes of David Frum. Frum accused Carlson and others on the anti-war right, and there's even saying anti-war right seems weird because there wasn't one until very recently, within the last 2 or 3 years. It was not there wasn't one in previous wars. Okay, Frum accused Carlson and others on the on the anti-war right of spouting Vladimir Putin's talking points. Well, he was, and it was a week before he invaded, and they were spouting talking points, and ironically likened his position to isolationist who hope to profit politically from that passivity. But ironically liken it? No, the irony here is that a week later, Putin invades after she writes this. Russian troop withdrawal may have temporarily neutered the pro-war momentum building in Western discourse. However, the overt hostility toward those who argue against escalating tensions with Russia may signal that it's only a matter of time before establishment forces, remember when you're hearing establishment, that's MAGA, isolationist kind of language. We don't say that. The rest of us don't say it. Are once more arguing that it's not just beneficiary, but rather necessary for Western militaries to strike before Russian forces can do the same. Nobody was saying strike before. Like, really? They're saying, look, he's on the border. He's got this huge army. We can see it. And I was hoping at the time myself, personally, I was like, Putin's not going to do that. He's just trying to get some concessions and he'll go home. But nobody that I knew was doing that, but she's writing this a week before it happened. Okay, let's look at the next big story. Every such accident is a test, whether intended to be or not. So far, NATO nations are failing that test. Well, what's the test? Russian suicide drone strikes Latvia? What? Okay, so this is Euro News. Russian drones violate Romania and Latvian airspace in just 24 hours. And so here's the president of Latvia talking about it. Russian military drone has crashed in the eastern part of Latvia yesterday. So it wasn't strikes like, hitting something important, crashed inside its sovereign borders. There is an ongoing investigation. We are in close contact with our allies. The number of such incidents is increasing all along the eastern flank of NATO, and we must address them collectively. But you got to do it. If you don't do something now, then it's going to continue to happen. And like, what's even going on? This is Latvia. Ukraine's down here. It went through Belarus into Latvia. Like, this is absolutely nuts. Okay, but every such accident is actually a test, whether it's intended to be or not, and so far NATO is failing that test. All right, two little stories. The Netherlands is going to deliver 3 more launchers for Patriot air defense systems this month, according to the Ministry of Defense. Thank you so much to the Netherlands. And Venezuela's opposition president, who actually won the election, but then it was rigged and he lost it, according to Maduro, he's now seeking asylum in Spain because he wants to live. All right, this is the last thing. Darth Putin, the parody site. I am hereby annexing the term innocent imperialist to describe myself. Okay, my friends, thank you very much. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.